right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh, only seen here out of Indie Music Studios, straight out of Long Island. Abe, how was your Thanksgiving?
It's pretty good, pretty chill. A lot of food.
Lots of food?
Hell yeah.
Like, what's the specialty at your house for Thanksgiving?
Well, my mom is the best cook I know, so I love the turkey, stuffing, Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday.
One thing I will tell you, right? So I grew up on my mom's food, obviously, like you're discussing. But once you get married, there's a quick switch over where you just become, hooked on your wife's food, and then it becomes difficult to eat other people's food too. It's
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
kind of strange thing.
No one is a better cook than my mom to me, so it's gonna take a lot, to dethrone her.
All right, well, we're excited. All the fans and the family are excited. It's very rare that you have an opportunity to have someone this special on your show. Do you know who we got on the show there, Abe?
I believe I do. We have a legend.
Pro wrestling royalty, Mr. Ricky Steamboat. Thank you, sir, for joining Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
Hey guys, how you doing? You might. I just saw your name tag. You go by Mike or Monty, or how should I address you?
You could call me Mike or Monty, whatever's easiest. Monty, usually people call me that. That's usually what they go by, so I'm good with that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll call you. If that being said, I'll call you Mike.
Oh, there you go. And again, part of me wants to call you Mr. Steamboat because of the ultimate respect I have for you. But in early discussions, it will be Rick. And
Yep.
What an honor it is to. How does it feel that people still, even someone my age, is in such awe of you for what you've accomplished in your life and your career?
Well, a lot of that has to be. The reason being is, in the mid '80s when Vince McMahon took the business and decided to go national with it on TV, coast to coast, and up to production level. I'm sure you could remember a lot of televised wrestling shows were done in small studios with maybe 50 people sitting on one side, hard camera side, and then he would take it to arenas and coliseums with 10, 15, 20,000 people, and everybody in the world just took notice of that, and made wrestling bigger than life. And then in turn, it made all of us, superstars and bigger than life, actors or athletes.
Well, and eventually everybody knew who, Ricky Steamboat was on a worldwide basis, and kind of helped that, number one, you're a really good-looking guy, and number two, you could wrestle like no other. So I guess put that combination together, and then you have one of the greatest pro wrestlers in the history of our sport, right?
Well, I was always an athletic kid. I can remember as back as 8 years old playing football, baseball, basketball. It wasn't until I got into ninth grade that I was actually going out for the basketball team at the high school. And, I'm in the ninth grade and at that time I'm maybe 5'8". And, you get your juniors and seniors, and of course you realize you're going to be sitting on the bench a lot. And I just kept looking over in the corner of the gymnasium where these kids were wrestling. I had a mat down and they were wrestling. So I went up to my basketball coach and I said, "What are they doing over there?" And he says, "Oh, that's our high school wrestling team." And it didn't take me 30 seconds. I said, "See ya." And I just walked over there, and Coach Reckenwall, he was there, and I said, I want to try out for the wrestling squad. And they had a weight class that was open, and I fell into that weight class at 165, and started wrestling as just in my freshman year there, and then got better as each year went by. And my junior and senior year went to the state championships. This was down in Florida, St. Petersburg, Clearwater area where I grew up. My dad was 22 years in the service, and when he retired in '67, he went to St. Pete and retired there. So I really enjoyed the sport. And I played high school football, and I was what they call like a power back. So I was like in between a fullback, halfback, and a flanker back. I could run out and catch passes, and at the same time run up through the middle. In my senior year, we had a pretty good football team. We went 9-1, and so I was involved with sports, and after a couple years, when I got out of high school, I was going to start a junior college down there in St. Pete, but at that time I was kind of fed up with the books, so I was just doing manual jobs for a couple years there. I was doing door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman for Kirby. I was selling Kirby vacuums door-to-door, and back then, and I'm going back to early 70s, like 73, 74, 75, 73 and 74, they were almost $400, for a vacuum cleaner. And you can go get a Hoover for $29 off the shelf. So, but commission on them were good. There was $100 for each sale. So I would go out and knock doors like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and try to get a sale each day, which meant if I got 3 sales, that's $300 back in the early 70s. And then on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you'd find me at the beach.
And you must have done well, right? Good-looking guy knocking on these housewives. They open the door. There he is, Ricky Steamboat, selling a vacuum, and they're buying 3 of them at a shot, right?
Yeah, well, I never got 3 sales in one place. I did get 2 sales in one household, but it was, you would try. I would try to always get 3 sales, and then head off and go to the beach. And I thought that was pretty good money. And I was always sort of a fan of pro wrestling with Florida Championship Wrestling. The announcer there was Gordon Soley. I remember as a high schooler, us guys on the wrestling team, we would drive from St. Petersburg over to Tampa, and on Tuesday nights at the Old Armory, we would be wearing our high school wrestling T-shirts, and we'd be sitting there in the first, second, or third row, just razzing the heck out of those pro wrestlers, and not knowing at the time that just 3 or 4 years after that I would be in the ring doing it. But I had a couple of my buddies that always told me, even when this was out of school, that he said, "You remember how we used to go to Tampa and we used to watch those pro wrestlers?" I said, "Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun." He said, and they'd say, "Ricky, you ought to try that. You'd be good at that. You were a good wrestler, and you ought to give it a shot." So, 1975, I heard about a wrestling school up in Minneapolis, Vern Gagne, and at that time there was the AWA. So one day I just put my clothes in the car and said goodbye to my mom and dad and my 2 brothers, and drove from St. Pete to Minneapolis. God, it was like 1,800 miles. And got me a little efficiency apartment. Now, just prior to that, I was selling Kirby vacuum cleaners, but I decided to, work harder. So instead of just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then I got a second job at night where I was like a bouncer at a bar down there in St. Pete, working nights. So trying to get the two jobs together and save enough money to get up there. And I found out that the camp was 2.5 months. It was 10 weeks. And I said I needed enough money to pay rent and food and where I could survive without having to get a job up there while I'm trying to go through this wrestling school. And school started November the 16th in 1975. And I went up there and got a little efficiency apartment. There, it was like almost a setup like you see in some of these, like a Marriott suite or something like that. You'd have a little fridge, had a little one burner, had mattresses on the floor, had a little TV tray that doubled as a nightstand, and it's what I ate off of. And that's the way I lived in that place for almost 2.5 months going through that school. Yeah, it was from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 5 hours of training. And I could tell you that was the hardest thing I ever went through in my entire life. Nothing like the training schools of today, you know.
So it was as tough as those documentaries show. Vern was really working you guys out.
Well, you know, Vern had Ric Flair went to the same school, and his class was the one before me. Okay, Bob Bruggers, Ric Flair, Iron Sheik,
Ken Patera,
Jumping Jim Brunzell, Greg Gagne, Vern's son. I think Chris Olsen, who was a big Olympic Oklahoma heavyweight, he was in that class. But their class was the one before me. It was 2 years before me. And I'll tell you real quick, on the first day we showed up, there were 16 of us. And I felt like I was the only one from out of state. Everybody else was pretty local. You know, they had some barroom guys, you know, tough guys. And I think one other guy had a amateur background in wrestling in school, high school. And 16 of us showed up. We had to pay $2,000. That was the entry fee. Back in 75, that was a lot of money, $2,000. I remember minimum wage was, I think, $1.50.
Wow.
And so, our coach, we called him Coach, but the guy that put us through the paces was, his name was Khosrow Vaziri. Is that name familiar to you?
Sure does.
Iron Sheik.
Yep.
Right? He put us through the paces. Now, at that time, Iron Sheik, I think he's probably about 5'10", and he weighed $180. All right? So, God, he had us doing these Hindu squats. Now, we were in the basement of a 20-story building. That picture there, he's about 250. But at the camp, he was $180. And man, he was like a steel pole. Man, he was solid. And we were in the basement of a 20-story building. Vern's office was on the top floor, and it had high ceilings in the basement. That's where the ring was set up. And first day we went over to the stairwell, and now from the basement to the top it was 21 flights, and he made all of us run up to the top and run down. Now, of course, a lot of guys didn't make it. I made it up and down. I think I'm not bragging, but I think I was in the best shape of pretty much all of them, because I really took it upon myself that while I was in Florida, 3 times a week, I would work out with the weights, and the other 3 times a week, I would go to the beach and I would run 5 miles barefoot in the sand. I had a spot to where I parked the car, and I'd run 2.5 miles up to this pier. They had a little coffee shop, grab a coffee, and then run 2.5 miles back to the car. And I was doing this 3 times a week to get in shape. So I think a lot of the guys that showed up thought that they could just be tough and didn't worry about cardio. So, all right, getting back to, we would run the stairs up and all the way up to the top, 21 flights, and then run back down. And then Khosrow looked at us, and he paired us off, 8 pairs, and he paired us off according to our size, try and make it equal. to the guy next to you. So then you had to get a guy up on your shoulders, his head over here, reach between his crotch and grab his leg, and you got him like in a fireman's carry, and carry this man up 21 flights on your back. Of course, nobody made it, but regardless of how many times you paused, Cosroe was relentless on making sure that you made it to the top, even if you just took one step at a time and had to take a rest. And so we all got to the top, ran back down, and then your partner carried you up, and then you ran back down. And then he asked each of the partners to drop down to their hands and knees. So I dropped down to my hands and knees, and my partner's name was Buck Zumhoff.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Buck, grab Ricky's ankles. And so I would have to wheelbarrow on my hands up 21 flights. And Buck is holding on to my ankles, and I'm trying to go up each step one at a time with my, after you get about the third or fourth flight, your arms are shaking, your shoulders are burning, you're trapped, your neck, everything, and you'd collapse. And this is a cement stairwell. I had so many bruises on my face and forehead from catching the edge of the step every time my arms would collapse. And make it all the way up to the top and run it back down and then switch. And then you grab his ankles and he'd have to go up on his hands up 21 flights. Now, that's all we did the first week because it took, like I said, class was from 10 to 3. It took all that time for everybody to complete it. And then we were off on the weekends, and the following Monday, out of the 16, 4 showed up. A dozen quit.
I was about to ask you how many fell out after the first week.
A dozen quit. And the 4 guys was me, Buck Zumhoff, a guy by the name of Jen Nelson, and another guy by the name of Scott Irwin, who wrestled pretty much in the Texas area and became pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think he passed away. I'm not quite sure of the medical terms, but I think he had a retinal something cancer that went into his brain. And he was a young man. I mean, I think late 20s. And Jan Nelson passed away with an overdose. And then Zumhoff is in prison for doing something with minors.
Yeah.
And so out of the 4, I'm the last guy, and then, and I went on with my career, but that was the hardest, 10 weeks of my life. I told myself the only way I'm not going to be able to finish this is if they tell me maybe you ought to quit or come back and do the camp the next time. I wasn't going to quit. And I went up there and I weighed 232 pounds. At the end of 10 weeks, I was 195.
Amazing.
I was spent.
Rick, I want to bring you back a little bit, though. You mentioned that you got tired of school. You just got a regular job. And your father, who was a lifer in the military, and God bless him for his service.
Yeah, 22 years.
At what point did your father ever say, hey, look, join the military? And if he did, why didn't you? And then I'd like to understand when you said to him and your mom, hey, guess what? I'm going to be a pro wrestler. What were they like? What was that all about?
Dad wasn't real uppity about me joining the service. I graduated from high school in 71, and they had the draft, but my number was like 300 something. So there was no chance for me to get drafted because I had such a high number. Even though my dad spent 22 years in the Army, he wasn't big, and they didn't push because in the late 60s there and the early 70s, Vietnam was pretty strong, and I think Mom had a lot to do with it. My mother's from Japan. She was born in Kyoto, which was the original old capital. And she'd never said to me, And Dad never said that Mom said. But I have a gut feeling that she just did not want to see her boys go off, to Nam or something. Didn't wanted to chance it. So it wasn't anything that was even having, kitchen table talk about. That day that I said I was going to be a wrestler and go to this camp, my dad was good with it. But you know something? My mom was more proud and excited about me doing that. And you could see it in her face and her smile and in her hug. But, her last words were, take care of yourself. Don't let them hurt you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. Rick, I want to go over a couple of news articles and then I want to get into your career a little bit.
Okay.
Recently, wrongly shaming a kid for blackface in a gross virtual signal and perhaps the laziest Monday morning quarterbacking performance ever, Deadspin writer Karen Phillips smeared a pint-sized Kansas City Chief fan as of wearing a blackface wearing bigot and accused the NFL and CBS of aiding and abetting this behavior. What were your thoughts about that when you heard that in the news?
I thought it was completely ridiculous, to put an emphasis on a young man that was a Kansas City Chief fan. And, I've never been to a Kansas City Chief game, but I like watching Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs is one of my favorite teams to watch. And, whenever they show the crowd there, and, there might be 90,000 people there at the stadium, and 50,000 of them are wearing what the kid was wearing. And to isolate and point that out, to try and get a ridiculous point across. There's just so many issues right now that bother me about the direction that this country has been going for the last 3.5 years. That it is just brainwashing, propaganda, and it, to me, very upsetting.
Let's stick on that subject a little bit. I agree with you. Where do you think this all started going wrong? Could I say that this country is really becoming soft, and we're not able to handle criticism properly, and we're making a lot of excuses for our actions nowadays? What are your thoughts about that? Where do you think this country started going backwards?
I never saw, I was never really big into politics until about the last 3 years, in which I started noticing changes. I never knew that in some of our more uppity elite colleges were teaching the young people more of a socialistic style of governing instead of our capitalism. I never knew that. Maybe because I just wouldn't bend an ear or wasn't that much interested. But then more and more of stuff becoming more visual to my eyes, and and they tell you don't believe what your eyes are seeing. Well, your eyes don't lie to you. What you see, and then after that is what you hear. And I just I don't know if the country's getting soft. I think I'm just going to say it. The Democrats had just come out with something so shockingly revealing. And since they were able to this last election gain control and power, being able to use that on you, and it's even more troubling now that some pieces of our government going after civilians, our teachers that are expressing a voice about what's happening in school and trying to protect their kids. and people being censored when our First Amendment with the freedom of speech, and it just behooves me how they can continually, and I'm going to use this word, lie and procrastinate propaganda, and to use that as a weapon. And you know that old saying, if you tell a lie enough times, you get people starting to believe it. And just things that have gone so wrong with our country, and then they can turn around and say, well, let's blame it on the Republicans because it's their fault. And I'm thinking, how in the world can it be their fault when you guys are the one in control, and everything that's been going on is because of what you've been doing? And they're using the Republicans as an scapegoat, because I think they're starting to see that the American people are not buying what they're being told. It's just not, it's not right, and it's also not correct. And that old thing about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This country in the past 200 plus years has been the strongest country in the world, the youngest country to be able to expand and grow as it did. And it was all because of the values that our forefathers put forth to give everybody a chance and a break and equal opportunities. And I just don't understand how they see that their way of doing things, of just basically going to end up with two classes. You're going to have the very, very rich, and then you're going to have everybody else underneath, and it's just, it hurts my heart, and it turns my gut. And, how much, how much this country has done for me, I'm half Japanese, and I was bullied when I was a kid and made fun of, slanty eyes, yellow skin, and all that. But both my mom and my dad, they just, take it on the chin. You're better. And I grew up with parents that believed in right and wrong. If you do it correctly. Do it the right way. I watched my mom being mocked when I was a kid. We lived overseas, and of course it hurt. But that was people that were not Americans. Those were, we lived in Turkey, and Germany, and Italy, and it was, I said they're not. My dad would say they're not U.S. citizens. So, don't worry about what they think, because our country's the greatest. And so, I get off on my soapbox on start talking more and more about it, but it just hurts me to see this direction, especially what has happened in the last, 3.5 years.
Well, I'll say I totally agree with you. So, hopefully change is coming soon.
And you're a New Yorker.
I am.
Yes.
I am.
Do you know where I was born?
Where?
West Point.
Were you really? Nice.
Poughkeepsie.
Very nice.
My dad was in the service. Now, he wasn't a West Pointer, but he was stationed there. Okay. And he met my mom in '49, and they came back to the States. And when he came back and brought my mom, it went to West Point, and that's where I was born. I have a younger brother, Arthur, who's a year younger than me, and that's the two of us were born there. So people ask me, where were you born? I said, New York, and they find it. Aren't you from Hawaii? I mean, that's what they, I said, no, that was just a wrestling gig, man. That was just. I had the Polynesian look, and that's how I got the Steamboat name from Sammy Steamboat, who was a true Hawaiian,
yeah,
who wrestled down in Florida for Eddie Graham.
Odd question. So, your father met your wife. She's from his wife. She's from Japan.
Yeah.
One, did your mom miss Japan? Like, did she want to go back after coming to the States? And two, did you ever have the opportunity to meet your grandparents when you were younger?
No. My mother's father died when he passed away when she was young. I'm saying best that I can recall is that, she was a teenager. He was pretty high up in a company, and I'm sorry, I don't know the company, but that company took care, my mom said, that company took care of what would have been my grandmother and the family through the company. Since her father was pretty high up in the company and he passed away at a very young age. So they were taken care of. Now, I'm trying to remember the other part of your question.
Did your mom want to go back to Japan at some point,
Okay.
right? Was she homesick?
All right. When they left Japan and then went to West Point, and I was born, right after that, we went to Italy. Now, during that move, my mother finds out later, way later, and I'll get to that her family moved from Kyoto to Tokyo. And during this time when my mom was with my dad in West Point in Italy, she did not know that the family moved. Now, my mom's last name is Ito, I-T-O. That's like the Smith and the Joneses over here in the States.
Wow.
It's, and so my dad was trying to get in contact with my mother's family through the American Red Cross and through the Red Cross of trying to get to, they over in Japan trying to get a hold of family members, but they could never find because there were so many Itos. I mean, millions. So I told you, like, they left in 49 or 1949 or 50. And so we'll fast forward to the early 80s, late 70s. I was going over to Japan and working with a promoter over there called Gianto Baba. And I would go over there and tour for 3 or 4 weeks and then come back to the States. And so in 1984, I went over there about 13 times. And in 1984, I went over there and I asked the promoter, Baba, I said, would you mind if your announcers would, during my match, tell the people who's watching who I am and that I am in search of my mother's family. And my mother's name is Takako Ito. And so he agreed. They made that announcement while I was wrestling. The very next day, a young Japanese boy, like a runner, came to my hotel room and he showed up and he says, we have big response people last night. And I was so excited. I said, oh, really? Maybe this might be my mother's relatives. And I said, how many people? He said, we have 200 names. And I said, 200? So my mom's family can't have, 200. Well, there were so many Itos, people were just saying, yeah, I'm related. But anyway, he said, what do you want me to do? So we're sitting in my hotel room and he had the list of names and the telephone number next to each name. And I said, would you mind maybe calling 10 people just to see what's going on? So he dialed the first number and it was my mother's oldest brother. Mm. First name. What are the odds?
Unbelievable.
So, and I couldn't speak Japanese. I mean, I could do a little restaurant talk, maybe a little cab talk, how to get to the hotel, maybe order some, sushi or something. But I couldn't have conversation. So through the kid, and he was interpreting, and I said, okay, we got to go on tour, and I won't be back to Tokyo for 2 weeks. I said, does he have any wedding pictures? Because I remember my mom and dad showing me their wedding pictures when they got married over there in Japan. He was a GI, you know. He had one stripe on his sleeve. And he said, yes, I have pictures. So after 2 weeks, we came back to Tokyo, and he met me in the lobby, and he opened up the album, and sure enough, there were the same pictures that I saw my mom and dad had. So he gave me his information, his, you know, address and phone number. And now, before I left on this tour, I never told my mom and dad that what I was going to try and do, because my dad was so unsuccessful for, God, you know, this is from, you know, 49 to 84. You know, it was just, he tried and it just couldn't make it happen for my mom. So when I went back and I went to my parents and I talked to my dad in the kitchen, I said, I got some information here. This is mom's oldest brother. He couldn't believe it. And I gave it to my mom, and there was, I think, a 12-hour difference in time between U.S. and there, East Coast time. So she called up the number, and her brother answered and was talking, you know, like 90 miles an hour in Japanese. And here's my mom. She could understand what he was saying, but she had a hard time replying because she had not spoken her language for 30 years. Mm. You know, it was, she could just get out a few words here and there. And so I was going to go back over to Japan and do another tour about 4 or 5 months later. And Giant Baba arranged to pay for my mom's airplane ticket to fly from, they were living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he flew her all the way from there to Tokyo. And we landed, we were waiting for our luggage. And off in the distance, people that would get their bags and go through customs and then go through these automatic doors that were opening up. And of course, those people, they might have had relatives waiting for them or friends. But I kept looking at the doors that were opening, and I saw this one guy who just, every time the doors opened, boy, he was looking hard. And I said, hey, Mom, next time those doors open, there's a guy standing on the left side that keeps looking real hard. And the doors would open, and my mom saw him. And now we're way over on the other side of this huge area. And then the doors would close. And then another pair of people would walk through the doors, and they'd open up, and then they would look. And finally, they waved at each other. And she turned to me, and she said, that's my youngest brother. His name is Gyuhei. So we grabbed our bags and went through customs, and when the doors opened, there she met with her youngest brother, first time in over 30 years. So he was taking us, he told us. My mom didn't even know, but she asked, is Mom still alive? And he said, yes, Mom's still alive. And I think at that time, Mom was like 85, my grandmother, her mom. And so he took us, he said, Mother is living with the oldest brother. That's one of our cats there. Anyway, so we get to the house, and for the first time, her mother and her daughter embrace. And that's the first time that she has seen her daughter in over 30 some years. And neither knew if one was dead or one was alive, you know, because for all those years there was never any contact. So I got a ride. I said, okay, Mom, you're going to stay here with your oldest brother and your mom. I'm going to go back to the hotel. I got to go on tour. So I catch a cab and go back to the hotel and leave the next day, go to some city, wrestle, stay there that night. The next morning, I go down to the lobby to get a coffee, and this young boy comes up to me and says, are you Ricky Steamboat? And I said, yes. You have telephone call. And I said, wow, this is odd. So I go over to the front desk and I pick up the phone, and it's my mom. And she goes, she always called me Richie. She says, Richie, I'm ready to go home now.
Oh, jeez.
I said, what? I'm ready to go home now. I said, what's up, Mom? It's only been one night. I finally finished argument with oldest sister, and now I'm ready to go home. See, her older sister never approved Mom marrying a GI. Right after the Second World War, right?
Right.
4 or 5 years after. And I was saying, Mom, I said, I'm under contract. I have to finish this tour. I said, Baba paid for your airplane ticket. Our departure date isn't for 2 more weeks. I said, you got to fix this. Please fix it. She's like, oh, okay. I fix it for you. So I go on tour, wrestled, 2 weeks. And at the end of the tour, back at the hotel there in Tokyo, and there is my mom with all her brothers and sisters. There were 6 kids. It was like four brothers and there was 2 girls, so it was 6 kids. And they were all sitting in the lobby with my mom, and they met me. And she told me, she says, yeah, we fixed it. Everything's good. So that was, so when we left and we're heading to the airport to catch the flight back to the States, she looked at me and she says, I'm ready to go home.
Amazing gift, though, you gave her, man. Think about that. It's an amazing gift you gave her.
But, real quick, to her, U.S. was home.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. All right, next news story, then we're going to get into a little bit of your career. Former WWE star Tammy Sunny Sitch gets 17 years in prison for deadly DUI crash. Former pro wrestler Tammy Sunny Sitch has been sentenced to 17 years in prison for drunkenly colliding into another car, killing a 75-year-old man with a blood alcohol level 4 times the legal limit. Thoughts on that, Rick?
I just vaguely crossed that story the other day, so I really don't know the ins and outs of it. I remember meeting her, at one time back in around, I'm going to say like 07, 06. I was an agent guy working with the WWE, and I think she was wrestling at the time, and it might have just run into her. I really can't say much because I really don't know her. Obviously what she did was very wrong, but like I said, I just heard wind of when the story came out a couple days ago.
Well, speaking of something like that, right? So obviously, no matter what forms of life, people run into certain addictions and stuff. While you were wrestling, were you ever uncomfortable wrestling with a wrestler because you might know they were on some sort of substance? And again, I'm just a fan, and my question would be, like Saturday night's main event when you wrestled Jake and you get dropped on your head at DDT, which I'm assuming was actual concussion that you received and pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Did you have concerns
that was my call.
With Jake?
That was not when him and I worked almost every night for, God, we had a good run for almost maybe a couple of months. I had the Dragon in my corner, this guy, and he had that Snake. And we sold a lot of tickets. There were a lot of curiosity seekers that wanted to come out and see what was going to happen during that match. I will say this, that every time that I stepped in the ring with Jake Roberts, he was straight as an arrow. And, what he did after hours was his own business. But during working with me during that run. And I also worked with him when back in the day when there were territories, and it was with Jim Crockett Promotions in the Mid-Atlantic region there, North, South Carolina, and Virginia. And he was working there at that time as Jake the Snake Roberts. And I had worked with him there. That he was always he was always on top of things. He was never ever in a bad way, or couldn't get to the ring or stuff like that. The horror stories that you hear later on. But no, I always I remember a comment he made, and that was and it wasn't to me. This was something like on air somewhere. And he said, when I found out that I was going to work with Ricky Steamboat, you better get in shape. So, I guess he took a real serious point about working with me in the ring. And God, we had some 5-star matches, him and I. He was a great psychologist in the ring. He's one of the greatest I would consider in the business on knowing what to do, when to do it, and what move to do and why you would do it, into telling a story in the course of a match. And he was able just to, on the fly, just be right on top of things. Boom, 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 boom. He was a great worker to work with.
Now, what happened that night, though, on Saturday night's main event? Millions of people watching this show, probably not the best time for something to go wrong. What did happen?
Well, I don't remember how the talk came out about DDT on the floor. And I'm thinking, best of my memory, this old noggin's been dropped a few times. So I made the suggestion, and I know Vince was there. They had those cushion pads all around the ring. I said, you need to pull that, you need to jump me, beat me up, pull the pad away, expose the cement floor, and then DDT me on the cement floor. And Jake was like, no way. He said, it may kill you. And I said, whenever you got DDT'd, you get your hand down there in time to protect yourself. So I said, don't worry, I've taken your DDT. I said, I'll get my hand down there and, let's make it real. Well, he went to DDT me, and I didn't get my hand down there in time, and it was real.
Oh,
it felt like a hand grenade went off of my head. And, even to this day, he tells people, he says, yeah, Steamboat was knocked unconscious. I had to pick him up like a rag doll and drag him into the ring. And we've had talk about it, and we've had laughs about it. And I said, Jake, I was never knocked unconscious. I had all my faculties. I was limp, because that's the way you're supposed to be if you ever get DDT'd on the floor. If the fans saw me help you pick me up, get to my feet, help you roll me in the ring, I don't think it would have the impact. So I went like a limp noodle for the reason that was what would happen if you really got DDT'd on the cement floor, but I had all my faculties and I wasn't knocked out or anything. But he thinks that I was knocked out because I wouldn't have, I was limp when he picked me up and tried to get me in the ring. He said, man, I almost dropped a nut trying to get you in the ring out there, man. I almost got a hernia. Damn. I said, well, that's, you want it to be, make it look real. That's realism right there. But I was good. Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
My own noggin swelled up pretty bad, and I didn't get black eyes till maybe about 2 days later when the blood finally started to move around. And boy, I looked like Neanderthal man with my forehead stuck way out there, like,
Yeah, well, worked pretty well. How did you stay so unscathed in such a hard business? All the traveling, people fall into drugs, things like that. How did you stay straight? Like, what was it that made you stay that way?
I got, bruised ribs and separated shoulders. it wasn't until recently, until I've had knee surgery, I've had a knee replaced, I've had my hip replaced, I got a rod on my back, and arthritis setting in all over the place. But during the time when I was working, I think one of the I was always the guy that go to the gym, and there was a lot of us, maybe half of the crew would find themselves going to the gym every day. But I think one of the biggest things that was my saving and grace, and not knowing at the time, but I knew it was doing me some good, is I would spend a lot of time stretching. I would find a corner in the locker room or down the hallway or something, and just stretch. And I could get to where I could almost do splits. And I would do this maybe a couple matches before my match was on. And, for 20, 30 minutes, break a sweat and get warmed up. And, and there was a lot of guys, sitting in the locker room reading a magazine, and they say, "Hey, Bobby, you're up," and just get right up and go to the ring. And I just felt, I started doing it in my rookie year, and I just carried it forward all those years to make sure I got a real good stretch, and I felt limbered and warmed up in my joints, and I think that really saved me.
At what point do you get into bodybuilding and actively competing in bodybuilding?
That was in the late 70s. I always worked out, and I didn't start working out until actually I made the decision to go to Minnesota. So about 8 months prior of leaving, and going up there in November, I found a gym and I started working out, like I said, 3 times a week, and then running on the beach 3 times a week. So, but then after that, I continued working out, and I got to where I thought I was looking decent. Pretty good. Never on a national level, but maybe on a state level. So in the late 70s, I just started doing some competing in local, state and regional stuff, maybe mid-Atlantic, it'd take in 2 or 3 states. And Mr. North Carolina, I won my weight class, didn't win overall, but I was in about 5 different bodybuilding contests. It was hard because I was still wrestling, and you're on that real strict diet, and you're watching your calories, and you have no energy to get in the ring. And the guys that I was working with at that time knew that I was going through that, and then they were pretty much carrying me through the match. But it was just a personal thing, maybe something on my bucket list that I just wanted to check off. I'm going to show you something real quick. Hang on.
Sure.
Just take me a sec. Actually, I'm going to... This is my what they call the man cave.
Yep.
This right here. Let me just give you a real. This was in my office here.
Uh-huh. Got a virtual tour of the Steamboat Man Cave.
Yeah. Okay. And then over here all the dolls and everything that they, I don't know, they got about 15 or 16 Ricky Steamboat dolls, but I want to show you this piece. Okay. This trophy right here. All right, I'm going to slide this over. I don't know if you can see this picture.
Yeah, we could kind of see it. Yeah, absolutely.
That's me. You know who this guy is?
Is that Snuka, right?
That's Snuka.
How do you compete against Snuka? What is that all about?
We were at the WBBG Southern States. That was North and South Carolina contest. The judges brought the 2 of us out of all the contestants to do a side-by-side. And because the points were so close. And at the end of the show, they gave me... this is it right here. They gave me the first place trophy.
Amazing.
And that was the only time Snuka was an animal. Man, he was, And at that time, he probably was close to 40 years old. And just a good fond memory of Jimmy. I always loved working with him in the ring. everybody talks about Ricky Steamboat's arm drag, and I'll tell you a story of how I got that. But anyway, Snuka was the best guy to feed me for the arm drag. He was the best guy to feed me for an arm drag.
Wow.
He was more of his body was like, when he was like a beast, it was raw. I had more maybe like a pleasing physical look, pleasing to the eye, more symmetric than Snook. But yeah, that was the only time we competed, and I narrowly beat him by just a couple of points.
Rick,
and let me tell you the story. You know who originated that arm drag? If you're familiar with my arm drag, I get way up in the air with the guy before I hook his arm. And everybody that worked with me knew, I said, you got to jump as high up as you can and just do a forward somersault, and I'll hook your arm, and then we'll land together. Well, I stole that from a guy by the name of Jack Briscoe. Jack Briscoe originated that flying style of an arm drag. So everybody thinks of Ricky Steamboat's arm drag, but actually Jack Briscoe was the originator.
And you just improved on it, right?
I could get up higher than Jack, I guess. Maybe, but truthfully, it just depends on the guy feeding you. If he can't get up in the air, you can't either, because you're underneath him. If he only just gets up a little bit, you can't get any higher. So yeah, that's a picture of me and Dory Funk.
Yeah. I was listening to you speak about.
If you look at the audience, that's in Japan.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. I was listening to you speak about Snuka. You have your own family life, and I get that. How hard is it to lose these brothers throughout the years? Is it because it's like your own little family, your other family? Yeah. How difficult is that? To me, the only time when I felt that I was close to all the guys that I worked with in the ring was at the time that we were all together. And then I got away from the business, and then I got back in about 2005, working with Vince and being a road agent, and working with guys again. But this is just being mean, and I hope it doesn't sound selfish, but it just, when I got away from the business, I just sort of wanted to be done with it. And then you just hear of who passed away, or who is down and out, or who is sick. And, I would have a moment or two, but I don't want to make it feel like I'm heartless, but for me, it was a brotherhood during the active time, and everybody just sort of, went their way as everybody got out of the business and went their separate ways. I don't know of too many guys that kept in contact even after the years they were out of the business. I run into them more at these convention signings, these fanboys, and have a moment. And of course, there's always an embrace and a hug, and it's good to see you. But and it's just a few times they say, "Hey, are you staying at the hotel?" "Yeah." "Well, let's go down and have a beer." "Okay." But for me, that was only maybe just a few times, and I've done 100 of these signings around the country. So we're real close and tight at the moment, but I think it's I don't know what the mindset is that once we're done, we're done. And I hate to make it sound like we're done with each other, but it isn't something where you go out of I don't go out of my way to try and locate and find and correspond with some of the fellow guys that I had great matches with. Only really one guy that I sort of stay in tune with, and I went to visit when he was down, and that was Ric Flair. At one time he had that
when he was in the hospital in Atlanta and I was living in St. Pete. Me and the wife, we jumped in the car and I drove from St. Pete to Atlanta straight away. I left late in the afternoon, 5 or 6 o'clock. Didn't get in till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I was there at the hospital the next day at 8 o'clock or something to meet with him. And he was in a self-induced coma. And his wife, Wendy, was there. And I was just sort of looking at him over his bed. And he, all of a sudden, and this was, they tell me this afterwards, it's the first time he woke up. And I'm looking at him. And he opened his eyes for the first time after being in a self-induced coma for a few days. And he looked up at me. And in the way Ric Flair would do it, he goes, "Ricky Steamboat! Unbelievable!" Right out of a coma.
That's funny as hell, boy. So, Rick, you're going to have to appease me now, because now that rolls into this question, since you're talking about Flair. Your name is synonymous with the greatest matches of all time. I mean, that's just another credit to your ability as the professional you are.
Now,
I know you do
documentary. Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had a hell of a WrestleMania match.
They certainly did, but here's the question. You do these documentaries. One's on Flair. You talk about the trilogy, you talk how great that was, and then you do a documentary on Savage, and obviously that WrestleMania 3 match, iconic.
Yeah.
Here's my question. To Rick Steamboat, which were the greater matches? The WrestleMania 3 Savage or your trilogy with Flair?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm a politician. If you want to take a Raw match and put two guys in it, and the only thing they know about the match is maybe the last 2 or 3 minutes of the match, which would be the finish, that would be myself and Ric Flair, and that would, to me, say that we were two consummate professionals. Now, I'm always mention the Savage match because to me that was the hardest match for me to do, and it's because Savage and I never had any matches leading up to WrestleMania 3. I would like to have called them tune-up matches. Savage was a different psychologist in the ring. And that would be, he wants everything to be set up and lined up. And, when you have a tune-up match, you could talk about some of the things you want to do in the match, and then you go out in a live audience in some of these tune-up matches and see what kind of response you would get from the crowd. If it wasn't good, when you got back to the locker room afterwards, you say, for the big pay-per-view coming up, we're not going to do that spot because everybody just farted all over it. So you'd have opportunities to put things together, and Savage and I never had that. But what made it difficult is that he wanted to have everything put down in stone, in writing. Well, it wasn't in writing. He just wanted everything to be set up and from A to Z. And if in the middle of that match, the fans were not buying it, it would be very difficult to change it and go to another different direction because he was so steadfast on what the next steps were. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. So, Flair and I, we could work an hour and only go and I would meet him in the locker room. I said, "Okay, all right, champ, they want us to go 50 minutes tonight on a 60-minute time limit. What would you like the last 3 or 4 minutes to be?" And, I got a real quick story if you want to hear it. We wrestled in Charlotte, North Carolina a couple of hundred times over the 8 years that I was there, and he was there for maybe 10. But we had wrestled at Charlotte, and we had done a couple of 1-hour Broadways, which meant in the main events, he had 60-minute time limits, and we had wrestled to a draw. And then we came back to, they wrestled Charlotte every 2 weeks at the big Coliseum. We came back 2 weeks later, we wrestled to another draw. So we're back 2 weeks later now for the third time, and George Scott, the booker, comes up to us and says, okay, you guys have done a couple of one-hour Broadways. Ricky, if you don't mind, let's get Flair over tonight. But let's do it where he does something behind the referee's back and he steals the win, where the referee doesn't see that he cheated. I said, okay, no problem. And I looked at Rick and I said, what do you want to do? And he said, when you start your comeback and when I feel it's right, I'll drop to my knees in the corner. I'll put my hands up like I'm trying to beg you off, and you just charge me. And at the last second, I'll duck under and I'll grab the back of your ankles and I'll sweep your feet out from under you. You go flat to your back. I'll look at the referee and I'll tell him to get down and count. And there's a very important reason for that. Get down and count. And as he goes down to count your shoulders, that's when I'll put my feet up on the second turnbuckle to use it as leverage to hold you down. Now, the reason why I told the referee to get down and count is because he did not want to see he did not want to middle the referee or give him the chance, any kind of chance, that he would have caught a glimpse of Flair putting his feet up in the second turnbuckle to get leverage. So when he told me that, how long did that take? Maybe 30 seconds? Mm-hmm. Now, George Scott, the booker, said, how about if you guys just go about 20, 25 minutes and then do the finish? We said, great. So we go out there and we had wrestled 2 60-minute draws. We go out there and we start wrestling, and the announcer goes, 15 minutes gone, 45 minutes remaining, and then 20 minutes gone, 50 minutes, and so 40 minutes remaining. And so so I look at Flair and I said, you ready? Because you remember the booker, George Scott, said go about 20 and then do the finish. And then at the 20-minute call, I looked at Flair and I said, you ready? He goes, not yet. 25 goes, 30 minutes goes. He goes, 30 minutes gone, 30 minutes remaining. I looked at Flair and I said, you ready? He said, not yet. So now we're up to 45 minutes gone and 15 minutes remaining. I said, are you ready? He goes, not yet. 50 minutes gone, 55 minutes gone, 56 minutes gone, 57, 58, 59 minutes gone, 1 minute remaining. I said, hey, asshole, are you ready? He said, Ricky, start your comeback. Now, understand this. The fans in the Charlotte Coliseum were almost sold out, saw us wrestle to 2 one-hour draws, and now there's 59 minutes. So what are they thinking? Oh, they're going to wrestle to another 1 hour draw. I actually saw people starting to get up and leave. So I'm bouncing Flair all around this ring. I'm trying to cover him with everything that I know. And then with about 15 seconds left, the announcer goes, 15 seconds. He drops to his knees in the corner and puts his hands up to beg. And then I hear 10, 9, and I bum rush him. He sweeps my legs out from under me. He looks up at the referee, Tommy Young, get down and count. And the referee turns and goes to count my shoulders. He puts his feet up in the corner. As the referee counts 1, 2, 3, the announcer's going 5, 4, 3. Ding, 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 ding. 2 seconds left on the clock. And they got one of those big basketball clocks that hang over the center of the Coliseum. 2 seconds. He rolls off of me, and he's laying on his back looking up at the ceiling. I'm still on my back, and I'm looking up. And he looks over at me, and he goes, wait for it. Wait for it. Because a hush came over the crowd. And then here it came. Flair, you no good son of a bitch. You cheat, no good. And he looked over at me and he said, We got him. And he rolls out of the ring, and he's hunkered down, and he's running back down the aisle to the Heels locker room, and they're throwing so much crap at him. And he gets into the locker room. Now I get up and wave at the fans, and they're saying, "Ricky, you get him next time. You know, he cheated," and blah, 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 blah. And I go the other way to the babyface locker room. I walk in the Coliseum around back. There's a hallway that goes around the building. So I go out. Customarily, what you do is you go to the other guy's locker room and you shake his hand and you thank him for the match. And so I went in, and George Scott is just berating Flair. He goes, "Oh, so you think you're the booker now, huh? You want to call the show, right? I told you to go 20. You went 59 minutes and 57 seconds, and I told you to go 20. What the heck's the matter with you?" And that's when I walk into the room when this action is going on. He looks at me and he says, "Steamboat, get your ass over here. You're part of this too." So he's yelling at me, and I don't say a word. And I walk over to the door that you go out of the Heels locker room that leads to the ring. I go open the door, and I stand behind the door where the fans couldn't see me, and I'm looking at George Scott, and I'm pointing like this. Listen to him, George. They're still screaming at him. They're still screaming. I shut the door, and I said, "That's all I got to say," and I walked out of the room. Amazing. 59 minutes
Amazing.
and 57 seconds.
So
timing.
Would it be fair to say then the Flair matches were your favorite?
You see, that match was never televised. That was just a regular house match.
Yeah.
But working with him, and for us to feed off each other in the course of a match, do this, duck, block my punch, kick me, But then Savage, everything was laid out, A through Z. When we started talking, when I told Randy, I said, we're not having any tune-up matches. He goes, "What?" I said, "Vince said we're not having any tune-up matches." He said, "We're going to make our debut day of the show." "Well, we gotta start putting something together. Damn." So we started meeting with each other whenever we could on the road. I was doing the injury thing with my throat, and meet with Savage on days we were shooting TVs, and we started writing things down. And finally, I brought this yellow tablet, this legal pad, and we got up to about 160 something steps. And with each step, there was like 3, 4, 5 things to do. Like, believe it or not, guess what step number 1 was? Step number 1 was lock up. And I said, "Randy, we don't have to write down lock up because we know we're going to lock up." "Write it down, Dragon, write it down." I said, "Oh my God." So number 1, lock up. Number 2, whatever, do this, this, and this. So after we got it all down, we would then quiz each other, and I would say, "Okay, Randy, step number 28 is this, this, and this. Tell me the rest of the match." "Step number 30, blah, 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 blah. Step number 31, blah, and then he would do me. He'd go, "Okay, Dragon, number 67 is this. Tell me the rest of the match." So, I think when we did that, it was so stressful to try and remember every single move and turn to the right, turn to the left, block this, do this, and then I think what made the match different, because that was, 1987, an average match would have 8 or 9 false finishes. Okay? That's a 1-2 and the other guy kicks out of it. In an average match. We had 20. 20 false finishes. And you had to remember 20 false finishes in consecutive order. You had to remember it, and both of you be on the same page on the same move. And plus all the other moves leading up to the false finish. And there was 2 times. There was one time during that match where Randy had a brain fart, flatlined. And he, "Dragon, I'm lost. What are we doing?" I started to rip off the next sequence, and he's, "Oh, okay, I got it." And then later on, I had a flat line. I said, "Savage, I'm lost." And he would rip it off, and I said, "I got it." And we ended up. But when that match was over, and I'm laying in the ring. I was so exhausted. I had not been in the ring for almost 3 months because of the injury thing that I wasn't supposed to be wrestling. I was so exhausted. I looked up at the top of the Pontiac Silverdome and I said, "It is done. It's over." A sigh of relief. It is over. I was actually looking up at God, and I was thanking him for it being over. It is done.
What does Vince McMahon say to you after that iconic match?
You know, I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember getting to the locker room, and I almost passed out. I was so exhausted. I mean, there was a lot of people coming up and saying, "What a match, you guys!" But I honestly don't remember. We got pats on the backs, and I remember, after WrestleMania, they have the big party, the after dinners party there after the show and everything. And I remember sitting there, and old timers like Gorilla Monsoon, Arnold Skolin. These guys were old school, hard knocks, and shaking hands and giving me a hug, and couldn't believe the match. Is how did you guys do that? But I've often said over the years, the consummate guy that I go to for me was Ric Flair. Because we could just say 2 or 3 things of special things we wanted to do in the match, and then go out there and wrestle for an hour, and all of it is just for the moment, called on the spot, feeling each other out, knowing that what I was going to do next, and he might have known that 5 moves back, so. But, the publicity that we got out of the Savage and Steamboat match, that match, it was just off the hook. And, it was a one-off, and we were able to pull it off. And everything that we put in that match was strictly on our gut feeling, because we didn't know each other in the ring. We didn't have any tune-up matches. We didn't know each other.
But
is it fair? There's your difference.
Is it fair? Is it fair to me to say, though, that the paydays up north were substantially better than down south?
That the what?
The paydays were substantially better up north in the WWE compared to NWA, WCW in the south.
Well, that's it, yeah. And I'll tell you, I don't want to make it sound like a no-brainer. When Vince, decided to go coast to coast in all the major markets, we're pretty much wrestling in venues that would seat 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people. So you're working off a percentage of the gate, the money taken in for the night, you're going to make more money. Working down in the Carolinas, we could have sold out Charleston, South Carolina, but the sellout was 1,200. So, yeah, I personally, and I'm pretty much the other guys too, was when I started to work for Vince, with my income, doubled and sometimes almost tripled, but only because we were wrestling in venues that had 3-4 times the seating capacity.
And don't forget about the merchandising too, right? You had tons of merchandise.
That was and for the first time, everybody was picking up on merch, which was a first. You're getting a check every quarter, and it was almost like found money. Plus I'm making top money working in the big cities around the country, and then you're getting merchandise money too. So it was very, very lucrative.
So at some point when you win the Intercontinental title, being from up north, that was always the gateway to becoming the world champion. And, God willing, if they were going to make you world champion, the money could have been really crazy. I know why they took the belt from you and why you stepped away to be with your family.
All right. You tell me why, and I'll tell you if that's right.
So from what I understand, you left, you were having a child. You wanted to take a couple of weeks off. and then they decided for whatever reason to take the belt off of you. Is that correct?
That is, when that angle with Savage and I came about in December of '86, and he came off the top rope with the belt, and then says I'm going to drop the Intercontinental to you at WrestleMania 3. I just told him, and I was being very upfront. I said, I just want to be upfront with you that I'm going to ask for 2 weeks off in July. I said, my firstborn, that's when it's going to happen. And I said, I've been on the road for, at that time it's been 10 years in the business and, 300 shows a year. And I said, I just don't want to miss my firstborn. And he said, no problem. And so everything was going according to plan. And I think it might have been around 8 weeks after WrestleMania, March, April, May, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10 weeks, that on a TV, I was walking into the building and Vince said, Ricky, I need to talk to you. So I came over and he says, we're gonna take the belt off you. You're gonna work with Honky Tonk, and we're gonna put the belt on him. And I said, Vince, when you told me you were gonna drop the belt to me, I didn't say this a second ago, but I'll say it now. I said, you told me that I was going to have it for a year. And I was up front with you and said that I wanted 2 weeks off to be with my firstborn in July. And you said, okay. And his response back was, well, I thought about it, and we just can't have the belt dormant. Key word there, dormant, for 2 weeks. So, so I dropped the belt to Honky Tonk, and I think it was within that same evening that I went to Vince and I said, remember in July when I wanted 2 weeks off? He goes, yeah. I said, well, I'm taking 6 months off, and I'm taking it now. And I walked out.
That's a gutsy move.
Yeah. But I'm looking at what is right is and what's wrong. I know there's politics, right? There's politics in every walk of life, but this just wasn't right. As him being a dad should understand, and as hard as all of us work on the road and being gone away from families, and I just wanted 2 weeks to be with my firstborn, and say the reason was you can't leave the belt dormant for 2 weeks. It hurt. It made me so mad and upset. I didn't show it to him, but it was more of a hurt. As hard as we all work, and then I couldn't have this once in a lifetime opportunity to be with a child that's being born. It just didn't make sense. But it's politics.
Well, speaking of your child, how's your relationship with your son now? I know he tried his hand at wrestling and had an injury. Yeah. How's he doing?
His back's never the same. He herniated 4 discs, but he's very fortunate that he found a girl, and he knew her, through family relation and friendship. We got pictures of them when they were like 5 years old. 2 little kids, right, running around. And then they re-met, like maybe 15 years later, and started seeing each other. And Richie was into wrestling and going through the school, and in Tampa, the first WWE school in Tampa, and then he got hurt, and she was going to college. She was going to law school, and they found a way to make it through, and then she turned out to working for a firm, going out on her own, starting her own law firm, and they have now got 4 kids, 3 sons and a daughter. And during this time, he has decided and accepted the fact to be a stay-at-home dad, which I was happy to hear, especially in this day and age, where at least you have a parent at home. And they got sort of like a farm with goats and pigs, and she's doing very well with her law firm, and he's doing a great job with the kids, being a stay-at-home dad. So, all in all, I truly believe it came out for the better. Don't know what the business would have done to them with him being gone 300 days a year on the circuit.
A lot of blessings there. All right, Rick, you've been with us a while. I want to thank you for joining us. One last question. In your storied career, I asked Ricky Steamboat, if there's one regret in your wrestling career, what would that have been?
Walking out for 6 months. I could have just stuck with the plan and taken my 2 weeks and been a yes guy, and I think that really, it set me back for a while. I felt it was justified, but then, when you're thinking about pride and how hard you've been working and all that you did for the company, and then you feel like you got shafted in a very, very wrong way because it was dealing with family. But, sometimes, emotions overtake. You better just think this out first before blurting it out on the very same evening that you're taking 6 months off and see ya. I think I should have taken a moment and thought things out. And if knowing me, I probably wouldn't have done that if I would have just taken a few days and calmed down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pride's a tough thing, man. Pride can get in the way of a lot of stuff, that's for sure. But we learn as we go on, right?
Yeah.
I guess I have one more question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I was going to say that lesson has helped me later in life before being quick, making unrational, quick decisions to take a moment. And you notice that when you asked me that question, I didn't have a hesitation on giving you an answer because there was some really truism behind it, that it was a lesson that taught me that I learned from and try to carry it forward today. Don't let because emotions, it could be the devil on your shoulder, and you're looking over on your shoulder and he's saying, do it.
Right.
Right. And you got to say, no, let me have a moment here, So that's what it taught me.
Well, we all learn lessons, right? That's what life's about.
Yeah.
With that being said, I personally, and I'm sure everybody else, wants to thank you for all you've done for wrestling fans out there, the years and years of enjoyment. And on a personal level, I want to thank you for taking the time out and coming on this show. I know you're a busy man.
Yeah.
And I just want to personally thank you. Thank you for all you've done, sir.
Well, I get a lot. I get that a lot, and believe you me, it's very appreciative. I somehow, some way, feel that when I do these conventions, for me, I'm trying to say thank you back to the fans that came out to support me and support the business. I feel in some way, even though, they may be buying an 8x10, but in some way I feel like I want to say thanks for being here. Because, bottom line is, because without them, we wouldn't have what we have. And I'm very comfortable now, and it's all because of people coming out and wanting to be entertained. And at the time that I was wrestling, that was one of my major focuses, is that I wanted to make sure that the fans at the end of the night my goal was to have the match of the night. And it didn't matter if I was in the ring with Jake Roberts, Ric Flair, Rick Rude, Greg Valentine, Macho. It didn't matter. I wanted to have the match of the night. And, I poured it out and gave it my all every single night, wrestling in front of 12 people. One time it was me and Shane Douglas against Steve Austin and the late Brian Pillman up in I think it was Fancy Gap, Georgia, and a snowstorm had come in. And during the intermission, they told the people, well, if you think you're going to have a hard time to get home, you better leave now. And it was a small armory, sold out. And when the four of us, we were the only main event after the intermission, one main event. When we went out, the front row was the only people there. Like maybe 12 people on each side, 40, 50 out of, there was 800 or 1,000 in this armory. And any given night, any other wrestler other than us four would have went out there and wrestled 5 minutes and then called it a night. But we went out there and went almost 30 minutes with just the front row sitting there and gave them a hell of a show because we wanted them to go home and tell everybody that walked out the next day or the next days that they missed a hell of a match between the four of us. And so, I always wanted to put out and make sure that the people got their money's worth. And that we walked away with the match of the night.
Good stuff. Real quick, Jason Morning wants to know, do you still practice blowing fire?
No. That was, I was taught by a guy in Florida named Brian LaPalme. It was one of those little parking lot Walmart circuses. Small, And he used kerosene. And that was kerosene I put in my mouth every night to blow that fire. And real quick story. I went mid-Florida, maybe near Orlando. He was set up, and he was through the company, the WWE. They found him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to teach Ricky." They went to Barnum and Bailey, and their fire breather said, "No, I don't want to give away my secrets." So they found this little circus company in Florida, and Brian LaPalme, and we're out in the parking lot, and he's telling me, now the big top, their tent, wasn't fully up. It wasn't erected yet. So he said, well, Ricky, be aware that whenever you do it outside and you have your torch, hold it up in the air and always look at the flames and see which way the flames are going. That'll tell you the wind direction. And make sure that the wind is coming from your back so that the wind is blowing away from you. So he fills his mouth up with kerosene. He holds the torch up. And just as he puts it to his mouth, the wind shifted. And as he's spraying the torch, the wind is blowing the kerosene on his face. And now I'm looking at a 12-year veteran running around this parking lot with his face on fire, going, ah, ah, ah. And they sent an office boy down, and I looked over at him, and I said, you see that guy running around? Running around like with his face on fire? I said, you call Vince and say, tell him I ain't doing it. I'm not doing it. Look at this. And so Brian LaPalme comes running back up to me, and he said, no, it's just superficial. It's like a bad sunburn. I'm okay. So he said, come back tomorrow when the big tent is done, and we'll do it indoors. And I came back, and he started with like a little shot glass of kerosene. And then it went on to larger, almost like a cup, enough to fill your whole mouth out and blow the fire out. And but there's a fire breathing story there with a veteran, 12 years of doing it, is running around with his face on fire. The next morning when I showed up, he's in his little Scotty trailer. It's these little mini trailers you tow behind your car. And I knock on the door, and he shows up, and he's got these big water bubble blisters
Oh boy.
on his face. Yep. And he's standing there, and all of a sudden he's taking his fingers and he's popping them, pop, 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 you know, and the water, and he's laughing. He did it as a joke. And I had another moment where I turned to the guy that the office sent down, and I said, I ain't doing it. Look at him. So,
You sure will,
he didn't have
Steamboat.
the eyebrows were gone. But this was a fair-skinned redhead guy that was teaching me how to blow fire, so you can imagine how bright red his face had just it was like a bad sunburn. Anyway, that's my fire breathing story.
And a hell of a story it was. Thank you again, sir. Have a great weekend, and thank you for everything, and thank you for being on Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
All right, I appreciate your show, and I appreciate what you do. You're a stand-up guy. You really are.
I appreciate
what
that,
you
sir.
do. Yeah.
God bless.
God bless. Thank you.
All right, guys, the great Ricky Steamboat. What an honor. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. He was fantastic. What'd you think there, AB?
That was amazing. It was a really good story about him going to Japan and finding like his mom's family. That's
how amazing was that?
That was one of the craziest
I was
stories.
thinking, like, man, I wish I could have done something remotely close for my mother like that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just like to have that many people reach out to you and you still are able to find the people, and she got to meet him. It was great. That was a great story.
You know, it's amazing. You always hear how great a guy he is, and even in the wrestling world, what a great guy is. Unbelievable guy. Great storyteller. Amazing person.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me. We love you all. We'll see you next Thursday. Abe, we'll see you next Thursday.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Love you all.